want you to do real quick, I need my light turner offers to turn off. Roger, will you turn those lights off there too? And somebody grab those back lights for me. Kaya, thank you. It's not going to be terribly dark, obviously, because I'm not going to turn all these out either. But I do want you to notice that it's darker, right? Like, just take a chance to look around. I want you to just see what it looks like around you with all the lights off. It would be great if we could have it pitch black dark, but this will serve our purpose well too. Just look at that. Now we're going to turn the lights. I need our light turner oners to go back and just turn them back on real quick. Just want you to notice the difference. Two things. You can leave these two off. Yeah. Two things I want you to notice is it looked different, right? We could all agree that it was darker and dimmer. But the thing that we don't often pay attention to is that it feels different with the lights off, right? There's kind of always a balance in our living room between what lights people want on and what light people don't want on, and I can leave lights on too long unnecessarily, just a waste of electricity. But also, sometimes I really like it kind of dim and dark. It's just an atmosphere change. It's truly just a change in the atmosphere. Honestly, that's why we leave these two lights off. It's just a slight feel or a difference. Christmas is and can be seen, I think it's a neat way, and I think it's a powerful way, to see it and approach it through that lens of light and dark. And the coming of Jesus being the coming of light into the darkness. And just to see how that, and so last week what we tried to look at was how dark it was, how broken, and that darkness was not just a literal a physical thing, but a spiritual condition and a cultural reality. And so we understand darkness. Here's how I'm using darkness, that darkness is an analogy, of course, for misery, destruction, ignorance and sorrow and wickedness and hate and death. Darkness enveloped the land when Jesus had come. And we said last week it was important to notice that Jesus came at the perfect time, and the perfect time wasn't kind of when it wasn't so dark. It was at the pinnacle of darkness, if you will. It was bad. The darkness was invasive and deep and very, very, very destructive. And so we use darkness like that. And light would be the opposite of all those things. Things like light would represent joy and hope and peace and truth and goodness and restoration and certainly life. And if you want to boil them down, darkness could be death. Light, it could be life. Jesus will refer to himself as the light of life. And so I think this is a powerful way, and I'm hoping it will inspire us to worship and to engage Christmas in a really, really helpful way. One of the things that I asked my group to do this week, and I invite all of you to do the same thing, is my failed attempts in the past to slow things down and to simplify have only resulted in frustration and inability to do that. Like the circumstances, it's just very difficult today in our culture to change necessarily the pace. We don't get to always, but what I discovered, I shouldn't say I discovered it because I really didn't discover it. It kind of was, it kind of happened to me. And that was, I'm experiencing, I would say for the first time, I'm beginning to experience the circumstances that I'm in Christmas differently. The pace is not different. The calendar hasn't really changed. But how we move through that has changed. And so what I asked our group to do was spend some time this week just envisioning the reality of the birth of Jesus. Just go back in your mind quietly at time. You could do this in your car, you could do this in your living room, but just envision that coming of Jesus, the birth of a baby in a manger, outside Bethlehem, all of that it historically, factually, literally happened. And as we do that, one of the things I'm inviting you to do is to see that as the coming of light into darkness to help us understand the impact of the Savior, the impact of the kingdom of God coming upon us. So as I start this message, I just want you to think about that. And I want you to think about how your life, think about this, and it'll help you. Think about how your day-to-day life is governed by light and darkness. Not only the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, but think about how many lights you turn on and off and how they impact your day. It could be the light from your computer screen, your phone screen. It could be a light bulb. It could be a jillion things. Look at all the lights that we use in here today. And I think it is a great opportunity to understand how Isaiah is speaking to us from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 2 through 7. So I want you to look there, if you will. Turn in your scriptures to Isaiah chapter 9, and let me read part of this incredible passage of Scripture, the prophecy of the coming of Jesus. Would you stand today as we read these scriptures together? Isaiah chapter 9, and I'm going to read verses 2 through 7. And we've read it last week, but we're going to read it again. Here's what it says in verse 2, which is where we'll focus again. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. You shall multiply the nation. You shall increase their gladness. They will be glad in your presence, as with gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you shall break the yoke of their burden and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, as at the battle of Midian. For every boot of the booted warrior in the battle tumult and the cloak rolled in blood will be burning for fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us. A son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. We shall call, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. God, I stand in desperate need of your wisdom and power to not waste anybody's time here today, and to ensure that you receive the glory and the honor from this time, that we are drawn into that, and that we are inspired, encouraged, equipped to live life fully in your kingdom, and to refuse, God, to learn to be a people who refuse to let Christmas just happen, but that we literally engage it in the way that it's intended. So help us to do that today. We're going to trust you in this beautiful, beautiful day of snow-covered landscape as we sit together and reflect on the light of the world who's come to us in Jesus. So we thank you for it. In Jesus' great name, amen. So listen to this verse again. One of the things that's helped me this week is to read over and over and over this verse and to just let it soak deeply in. In verse 2, he says, the people who walk is to live, to dwell, to inhabit. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. I think it's significant that we emphasize the word great, not just the light. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. And they were in great darkness. Last week we talked about that. The death, the destruction, the suffering, the agony, the hopelessness. They lived in a time and a season when it was just very dark. And you and I understand that, the metaphor, because we've been through dark times in life. Whether it was the loss of a loved one, a time of spiritual searching and longing, and maybe you felt like you were in that desert land where God was just not, you felt like not present. You could have gone through financial difficulty. You could have been entangled in some kind of sin and brokenness of taking life into your own hands and being self-reliant. But we understand when we talk about walking in darkness. And he says this, he says, the people who in that day were walking and living in darkness will see, with certainty, they will see a great light. And then he affirms that, saying, those who live in a dark land. Now that's a little bit different statement. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. That second part really does, it kind of emphasizes the circumstances they are in versus the lives that they are living. Now they are living those lives in their circumstances. But you could think of that second statement of those people who are in an environment of their not of their choosing that is darkened, by death and destruction and ignorance and sorrow, those people, the light, the great light, will shine on them. One of the things I really truly hope that you can track with me through this is how this happened to the people and versus them achieving it. Trying to scramble around and to find the great light. The emphasis here is the light will shine on them, not they will find the great light. So it's important to notice that Isaiah puts that in that context, and the coming of the light is God's initiative. I want you to know this. I want us to recall it, reflect on it, take it in, that God wants you in the light. He wants His people to experience light. And light is not just moral goodness, it is. Light is not just trying to be a nice person. It obviously moves us into holiness and righteousness. But light is the life we were intended to live. It's good, it's beautiful, it's right, it's true. And we are invited, we are called into that light, God's initiative. He wants that for you. Not because He's grading you pass, fail, because you were made to live in the light. You're a creature of the light. And I think it is a beautiful reminder that we have lights on our trees, we have lights on our houses, and if you just can be cognizant, just aware enough that when you go into a dark room, the first thing you're going to do is turn on a light because you need it. It changes everything when you walk into a room and the light is turned on. I mean, you can function. This morning I walked out of the bathroom after getting dressed, and the bedroom was still dark, and my faithful, loyal, loving 11-year-old lab does what she always does. She lays right outside the bathroom until I'm out. For some reason, she did not see me coming. And I punted her, except I didn't punt her. She didn't move. But my foot met her with force. And I heard her go, oof. I was like, oh, Trixie, I'm very sorry. I know you're 11, and you could break at any moment. I'm very, very sorry. And I would never have kicked my lab in the light, right? I would have never. The light brings goodness to us. It truly does. And when Jesus, and we'll talk about this more, but when Jesus was born in that manger outside of Bethlehem, in that very humble place, that stable, that feed trough, light came into the world. And it's available not just then, but now. We're going to walk into that. So that when Isaiah says, he says that those who live in a dark land, they will see a light, or light will shine on them. And previous to that, he calls that light a great light. Look, I just wondered this week, why a great light? Isn't a light a light? I mean, isn't light light? No, not all lights are light. We have two different kinds of lights on our Christmas tree because they hardly sell the old kind of lights now that we had, and we bought LED lights. So we have both kinds, and there's a stark difference between the traditional little Christmas light and these incredibly bright little green and red LED lights. And not all lights are created equal. And so when Isaiah says there's a great light, he is speaking to things that of the scope. I think the scope, the range of the light, right? The how far it illuminates is spoken to. Its illusion. We're alluding to that when he calls it great. But also in its brilliance, there is a difference between a traditional light bulb and an LED light bulb. And there's certainly a difference in the light that Jesus brings. It is unparalleled in its brilliance, but also in its effect on the darkness. And it's certainly speaking in the moral and spiritual realm that it absolutely permeates and I would say extinguishes the darkness. This light is more than just a light. It truly is. Jesus' coming truly is a great light. And again, I remind you and I remind myself, we were made to live in that light. To live outside of the light and the range and the scope of that great light is only our choice, and it is not how we were made to live. We will walk around kicking, stumbling, and falling over things, causing self-inflicted woundedness to ourselves only by the refusal to step into the light that God has made shine upon the world. This is Christmas, to illuminate our eyes, to help us see the beauty and the truth and the goodness that God has brought into the world, life in His kingdom. This is really why, Covenant, we say this over and over, that we are called to live life with Jesus. We want you to live your life with God, because that is the equivalent of living in the light. Jesus said it over and over too. So that's definitely the parallel. But Isaiah wasn't the only one to use light to describe the coming of Jesus, not even close. Luke's gospel, there's mentioned a couple times. Zacharias, John the Baptist's father, one of my favorite statements, one of my favorite Christmas phrases was his prophecy regarding how John the Baptist would relate to the Messiah and in that relationship. But then he says this in Luke chapter 1 and verse 78. He says, because of the tender mercy of our God, not the beautiful words, because of the tender mercy of our God, with which the sunrise from on high will visit us. Because Jesus, the sunrise from on high. The tender mercy of our God, this is Christmas, has caused the sunrise from on high to come visit us. In Luke chapter 2 and verse 32, Simeon was a man that Luke describes as being known as righteous and devout. That's how he's described. Simeon, a righteous and devout man who lived with an intense, an unparalleled longing to see the Messiah, to behold, to lay his eyes on. He describes Jesus as a light of revelation to the Gentiles. A light that brings revelation or understanding or knowing to the Gentiles. In John's gospel, he refers to Jesus as the light several times. In the first couple chapters, in one of the, I just love this in chapter 1, verse 4. He says, in him, that's Jesus, was life. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The life that Jesus brings is the light of men. And then Jesus says this of himself. He says, finally, I have come as light into the world. I've come as light into the world so that everyone, all of you included, so that everyone who believes in me, Jesus said, will not remain in darkness. Today, and we'll finish with this in just a moment, but today you are not stuck in darkness, no matter how stuck you feel. You are not bound to it. It is not your inevitable reality. You're not assigned to it as punishment. No one has to live their life in any range, in any realm, in any capacity in darkness. No more, because Jesus has brought this light. Light always transforms darkness. Think about that. You could go in a room that has no windows whatsoever. None whatsoever. It could be as black can be. And you could light one match, and it would penetrate. You would see the match. The light would penetrate the darkness. And Jesus' light is not just a small match in a very dark room. It is the great, great light. Light always penetrates the darkness. So I say this to you again as a teaser towards our conclusion. But the light of Jesus, let me reverse that and say it this way. The darkness, if you were to say, hey, I know Jesus, I have a relationship, but I'm stuck. And there are aspects of my life that I'm still tangled up, and I'm not sure how to get this darkness dealt with. I want to step out, but then I step back, and I'm just telling you that the light of Jesus, if you allow it to invade, if you invite him in, it is inevitable that it will bring the light of life, because that's what he is. So let me say it like this. When Isaiah tells us the birth of Jesus is like a great light coming into the deep darkness, he is saying that mankind, you and I, today, even at this Christmas, have a choice. We have a choice to make, and the choice is going to be clear. There is a big difference between light and dark, right? There's no mistaking that. It's not like, well, I kind of like, and don't get too literal with me and say, well, sometimes I like it dim. Yes, I get that. But if you're talking about dark and light, noon and midnight, not with full moon, because sometimes in Kansas, especially with the sun or with the snow, it's going to be very bright out at midnight. But a dark of the moon, midnight, and noon sun, as in July noon, those are incomparable realities. Like there's no, I don't know, I like them, they're both the same. They're not the same. They're entirely different. And light, this really grabs my heart today. Life with Jesus is nothing like life without Jesus. That sounds like an overly simplistic statement, doesn't it? But it's not. Because we're blending in, church. We are. somehow our lives don't look with Jesus, largely because we haven't learned fully how to do life with Jesus, oftentimes don't look, there's not a lot of difference in terms of how we live and how we experience life. But that is because we haven't learned to live in the light. I'm telling you that life in the light, life with Jesus, is unmistakably different than life without Jesus. So, let me move towards this. When Jesus says in John chapter 8 and verse 12, he says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me, note that word, follows. I am the light of the world, he said. Remember all the range of light, all that light does literally for you, and his comparison of himself to that. He says, he who follows me, note that word follow, because that is not a passive word. That's a very active, engaged word. It's a word that has a direct implication of obedience too. You can't follow Jesus and not go where Jesus is going and do what Jesus is doing. So he says, he who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Let me speak this to you this Christmas as we look at it. If there is darkness, it's just very, very simple, and I'm dealing with this in my own life, and everybody in here will take this and not be able to escape the reality. We all can deal with this. If there is darkness in your life as a follower of Jesus, it is as simple as this. It doesn't make it easy, but it is not complicated in terms of understanding. The darkness is only present due to our lack or our unwillingness of obedience to Jesus. And I'd said that's a simple concept. It's not always easy to embrace. I will stand in front of you and tell you there are times in my life I know exactly what Jesus wants me to do, exactly what I need to do. And there is also a very, very real spiritual battle at times that wants to push back and not have me, the enemy, not have me obey Jesus and step into the light. It is one of the most confusing things I personally have ever experienced spiritually. To know that obedience to Jesus would bring light, but to have a strong pushback of saying, no, hold on to the reins, remain in control, don't follow Jesus there. It is, it's almost what it is. It can be very, very unsettling. And I'm learning, and I invite you to learn with me, that sometimes, maybe most often, to get to the light, we just have to know the light is better, regardless of how I feel, so I will step towards it in obedience. You can step out of whatever darkness you're in today. You can. And you need others. You need other people to help you, to encourage you, to hold you up. But obedience to Jesus, when he says, I'm the light of the world, whoever follows me won't walk in darkness. Well, you'll have the light of life. I say that with great sympathy to the difficulty that can bring, and how I'm not saying that like, hey, it's as simple. I'm saying that with full sympathy of knowing that sometimes there is a battle that rages inside that wants to resist obedience to Jesus, even though your brain knows different and your heart knows different. I know one thing, as I've taken that battle on, I know one thing, you can't do it by yourself. We need to do life with Jesus, but we have to do that together. I promise you, you have to lock arms with somebody. You're going to have to be vulnerable and real, and you're going to have to share the struggle. I'm not getting in details with you, but I'm telling you this, that I share my struggle here. Like I share my struggles. This is an ongoing. It doesn't just happen in one place of your life and then go away forever. And this is, Romans 7 is a battle. It's a reality. There's a battle that happens. And you have to lock arms with somebody you trust. Trust enough to be real and honest with and say, hey, I know what obedience to Jesus looks like here, but I just need to want to do it. I need you to pray. You could ask your spiritual partner in this. I need you to pray that I would have the desire to desire obedience. Because once you desire it, you'll do it. Once I want it, I'll do it. Hey, if we leave pecan pie in my refrigerator, Desire is not a problem for eating it. Actually, it is the problem with eating it, because I cannot sit down and everybody leave, and I'm 10 o'clock, going to watch the news or whatever, and go, there's pecan pie in the refrigerator. You shouldn't eat that. I mean, you're not going to burn off any of the 4,000 calories, but it's going to be good. I think the cost is worth the price. No, it's not. You're going to weigh 2 pounds more in the morning. So, that's my answer. So, have the pecan. My will always wins. My desire leads my course of action. And when I don't want to obey Jesus, when I don't want to step into the light, my problem is a desire. It's a will problem. And I'm praying. I've learned to start praying. God, help me. This is hard to do, but I tell Jesus, right now, because he already knows this, by the way, but it's so hard to say. It's hard to say right now. Jesus, I don't want to obey you right now. And I've never said that to Jesus and had him going, oh, really? Usually I get this sense that he's saying, I am so glad you admitted that, because you're never going to obey me until you admit that. I know. If you wanted to obey me, you already know how, and you would have done it. And I'm going to challenge you, one of the best ways to get out of darkness and into light, whether it's in money, marriage, addiction, maybe a condition of your heart where hatred has taken root. Maybe you have unforgiveness. Maybe you have resentment and bitterness. Maybe you have jealousy and greed or lust. Whatever has, and you just know, and you do your best. You work hard to keep that darkness hidden in your life. Maybe one of the first steps you could do to turn the light on in your life, to step into the life that Jesus has called you to, one of the first things you could do is get into the car, or you get alone at home and just say, Jesus, I don't want to obey you, but I want to. Would you help me? And that I have found to be one of the most powerful prayers I've ever prayed, quite honestly, especially when it comes into the realm of light and darkness. See, the gospel is such amazing news, it's such an amazing reality that offers a way of returning to the light anytime we find ourselves having strayed from it. And you know what? I know this journey back to the light well enough to know that some of you are staying in the dark because you feel guilty and you feel ashamed and you've come back so many times and you feel like you've worn out your welcome of going back to the light. I know. And sometimes it feels easier to just stay hidden, right? To keep it in the dark. To just and then you come to a season where you've harbored darkness, and you come to a season like Christmas. We have these beautiful decorations, we sing these amazing songs, and you have bell ringers at all the doors. Don't you love that? Like, I just love the bell ringers and all this warmth and happiness, and there's plans, there's food, there's family, and you are carrying and you're dragging darkness around in your life. Like this weight. And you're like, I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to drag this around. But maybe you're saying today, I don't know how to get rid of it. And you're going to have to trust somebody who knows Jesus, and you're going to have to be really honest with yourself, with that person, and with God. I will tell you, if you want to try it by yourself, go ahead. If you want to try to get out of the darkness without being accountable and authentic with somebody else, you can try that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it is very hard. There is something automatically powerful, intrinsically powerful, in confessing, as the scripture says, confess to one another, to another person that you trust where you're at. But there's a way back. There's a way back. You know, and I would close with this. If you are a person, you know, honestly, I know every one of you almost so enough to say I know where you are in your spiritual journeys, at least what you've allowed. And so, but I know this, that what we oftentimes portray externally may not be the accurate reflection of our internal reality in regard to faith in Jesus. So if I were to ask all of you, or if you were to talk to somebody that you know and trust personally, and they were to ask you, do you trust Jesus in the way that means you're willing to obey him as a way of life? Are you willing to depend on Jesus? Are you willing to rely on Jesus? Not just a transactional, forgive my sins so I can go to heaven one day and let me live my life. No. Are you willing to put your life down in front of Jesus and say, now, Jesus, I follow you? And if you've never come to that point of willingness to trust Jesus in that capacity, you've never found the light that he's offering, and I want to offer that to you. I don't have the light. That sounded wrong. I don't have Jesus in my hip pocket and say, I'll give you Jesus. I am saying that I can offer you the way of truth to know the light. And the way of truth is to turn from sin, turn from self-reliance, and you place your confident, simple obedience, trust, and belief that Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, that no man, woman, or child comes to the Father, comes into the kingdom of the Father, except through Jesus. There's not another way. There really, truly isn't. Being nice, giving money, shaping up, being moral, not, the scale thing, where I have more good than bad, doesn't work at all. You could try it. You'll find yourself bound up in darkness forever. It just doesn't work. You know the darkness in your heart, but I'll tell you how you step out of complete darkness. You say, Jesus, I've tried to live my life, and I don't do it well. And I'm going to trust you. So I'm turning from my sin. Simply think of that as I'm not going to be self-reliant anymore. I'm not going to depend on me to call the shots. I'm not going to determine morality. I'm not going to determine right. I'm not going to determine truth. I'm going to let Jesus do that, and I'm seeking to be obedient. And then his Holy Spirit fills your life and empowers you to be obedient. You're not going to feel like you can be obedient to Jesus until you determine that you want to be obedient to Jesus. And when you step out of the darkness into the light, you will find the light of life filling you. I'm not saying or suggesting or hinting even that life's going to be perfect, but it will be beautiful. There will be an inner beauty and an outward beauty. There will be joy. You'll find the things that you've been looking for finally, without circumstances even necessarily changing, because what will change is you. The Bible says you become a new creature, not your world. You become a new creation, and you begin to happen to your world. You begin to experience everything else in a different way. You become the light of the world as the light of life fills you. So maybe this Christmas, if you and I would just take some time to think about the coming of Jesus as light and darkness and how to live in that light, how to embrace that life, we would experience Christmas in a different way. I've given up. Maybe I shouldn't have. You can challenge that, but I've given up on trying to manage, the chaos in terms of slowing it down and managing, not doing this, not doing it. It just happens anyway. But what I want to do is I want to begin to enter into the chaos and the culture that floods me and floods us. I want to do that in the light of Jesus. A simple trusting and obedience to him. Would you join me in that this Christmas? Next week we're going to put all this together as we prepare for our Christmas Eve service. And I really encourage you to be a part of that because it will culminate. It's going to be a beautiful time together. We're going to have our kids as an active part of that. Larry Thomas is going to read a really cool Christmas story in segments to our children. We're going to have a living room scene set up here at the fireplace. It's going to be a beautiful way to set the tone for your Christmas Eve. So I invite you to come and be a part of that and to invite your friends and family. They will not be disappointed. It will not be over an hour, and it's going to be significant and worth your time and celebratory, but also reverent and beautiful. So encourage you to be a part of that as we culminate this season with a season of light, with a beautiful time together. So, hey, my last offer is if you want to talk, I'm available to talk. As soon as the service is over, come grab me if you would like to visit more about living in the light with Jesus. Would you pray with me? God, today, I know this battle very, very well. And I have more joy and more peace today because you called me into honesty with you. And no longer feeling like I have to pretend or hide darkness has been liberating for me. And finding out that the light will shine on me, I don't have to, it's not something I achieve, it's literally something that happens to me through obedience to Jesus is freeing and amazing. And transformation happens so much more clearly when I simply let you happen to me instead of me grasping and trying to hold on or achieve or earn. So I pray that the light of life would fill our hearts this Christmas. Help us to be that light to others, to lock arms. God, maybe one of the most significant things could happen in this service is that two people, two believers, would lock arms and begin to do life together. Maybe a husband, a wife, a brother, a sister, or two friends, or co-workers, or whoever. They'd lock arms and they'd say, let's do this life in the light together. We need each other. Help us, Father, to be dependent. And I thank you for the chance to be dependent on you and each other. Would you bless this, God? Call us forward into the light perpetually and without fail, and help us to truly be obedient to that. We love you. We thank you in Jesus' great name.